So howdy folks. This is going to be the first of a set of 3 videos talking about the evolution simulation. I'm going to go over in this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how I set up Unity and just sort of like the general organization of the Unity side of things, like in the inspector and things like that. And then the other ones, I'll go more into different aspects of the scripts that I used. You can see that I have kind of the basic stuff working down. You can see I have some a little display that's showing the average speed and the average vision. Those are the 2 things that I'm having evolve over time. And my critters sort of walk around. They collect enough food, they walk back to the edge. When they've collected enough food, you can see the food sort of appearing and disappearing. And that's kind of my, the beginning of the day, the food appears, and at the end of the day, it disappears to kind of sort of tidy things up before the end. So now that we've kind of seen just the thing running and kind of what we're going to end up with, we'll get into a few different things. So one of the things to kind of remember is that this is really meant to be a, sort of like a rough demo of the kind of thing that you can end up with. So there's actually plenty of places to improve and modify and adjust in here. I tried to do things in a way that I thought people would understand, but it's definitely, there's plenty of things that I kind of look at. I'm like, maybe I could do that better. Maybe I could do that better. So hopefully this will be good inspiration for you to work on your own and help you maybe troubleshoot some of the tricky parts. So the basic aspect is, really the only object that you see right now is just the ground, which is made static, and I baked a nav mesh on it so you can see that. And that's really the main component, like physical component in the world in this one. And then the second real main one that I have is I have this thing called world control, which I have a couple of scripts attached to. One is my data visualization script, which handles the updating of all those numbers and putting text on the screen. And it relies on some Text Mesh Pro objects that are right here that are linked in. And then world control, which is this day-night cycle, is reliant on my prefabs of the food and the critter. So day-night cycle is actually kind of like, I would say the second biggest script. So this one's kind of handling the day and a lot of the upkeep of the critters. And then there is, if you actually go into the prefabs, you can see the prefabs here. The food prefab is really simple. It just is set up to be a trigger. That's its main thing. And then there is the critter, which is set up to have the nav mesh agent. You'll notice that it has a tag that says critter. The food has a tag that says food. And it has the critter control script, which you can see has a lot of properties and things like that. So we'll kind of take a look at all these things in a second and why they're there and what they mean, probably in a later video when we talk about the critter control script. You'll notice something here that you might not have noticed before is that this prefab, I can click on open prefab, and you can actually see that this prefab is a empty game object with another prefab inside of it. And you'll notice that the capsule is on that prefab, and this one really just has a rigid body and a nav mesh agent. And you're like, why is that? And the reason is because I thought later on I might want to have it look different than a cylinder. And so I made the critter body a separate thing so I could change it, and then it would automatically change my critter. This also gives me a little more flexibility of placing it because this the body is then relative to the game object that it's in. And so then I'm basically placing the game object. And so if I wanted to make it look like it was floating or add animation or stuff, I'm not trying to place the thing that I'm animating. I'm just placing the the empty game object, and then this could be a cool animated thing later on or something like that. So that's the main setup of everything. That's it. I got these prefabs. That's it. and I'm using those main things here. So let's go over the scripts real quick, and I'll go into detail what's in all of these scripts in a later one. But we have a couple of important scripts here. So the first one is critter control, and that has all the stuff about moving and should I be trying to find food and things like that. So that one's got a lot of things in it, and so we'll look at that one in detail in a later video. There's this one called critter stats, which is just a helper one. You can see here that it has just a bunch of the properties that I want to keep track of about my thing, like if I'm wandering around, if I'm how big I am, how fast I am, things like that. Have I eaten food? All those kinds of things. Data visualization, we'll go into more, but this is all about updating the screen with the average speed and the average vision. Day-night cycle is sort of my my big system checker. So this does a lot of things like spawn all the food and things like that. So it sort of manages all that. So we'll talk about that. So it sort of decides when should food get spawned, when should things reproduce, things like that. So it's kind of watching over the whole simulation. And I just called that day-night cycle. And then there's spawning, which are just my algorithms that do specific spawning things, because I actually have a lot of different kinds of spawnings. And so I made a little helper function to hold all of them so that I could call them in other functions more easily. So if I needed to do some spawning in different places, I could keep those a little simpler. And so that let me reduce the size of that day-night cycle. And again, when we talk about day-night cycle, we'll look at these two together. The one that I really want to talk about right now is one that I made to really make my life a lot easier. Is that I made a class called World Data that has all of my main settings for the simulation in it. And so I have stuff like how big the world is, how big the area is where the food can spawn or not spawn, the food spawn chance. I'll show you what that is. This is a simpler way to do food spawning that I can show you. This is how much energy you get per food right now, the starting population, how many pieces of food you need to get to reproduce, how long a day is, and if it's day or night. So these are all really nice things. Really, this is the only one that changes. Notice how these are set up to be constant, which means once I set them, nothing's going to change the world size. Nothing's going to change how much energy we get per food. They're just sort of constants for my simulation. And then I had one thing this night that I wanted lots of things to be able to access to know if it was day or night, based to trigger some different things happening. So this ended up just being a great place to put information that I wanted to be able to access in lots of my different scripts, so I could change a number in one place and have it update in other places. That ended up being super duper helpful, making all sorts of other aspects. It made me have a lot less typos and errors. So I really recommend you do this when you have a bigger project like this, and there's some stuff that you might need to know in different places. So that ended up being pretty helpful for me. So that's the quick overview of this. I'm going to stop this video. This is kind of like how I set it all up. And then the next two videos, I'm going to go deeper into each of the scripts and how they work.